All right, and welcome everyone to the Ginette Biro Podcast. I'm Ginette Biro, and today I'm so excited to be introducing you to Susanne Venaas. She is an international energetic and spiritual coach based out of St. Albert, Alberta. She works both in person and virtually with many different modalities. That's what I'm excited to talk to her about. She has an online school with clients to help them connect with their most authentic selves with wellness, and her integrative approach really brings in body, mind, and spirit wellness to those that she works with. So welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ginette. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk to you too, because what I'm really dying to dive into with you is light language. But before we get there, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you got into this whole world of wellness, holistic wellness, and then light language.
Yeah. We'll do like a Coles Notes version
Yeah.
with little pockets of the synopsis. But, you and I have conversed before, and I've talked about on my own podcast with my journey. My sister and I used to see spirits. We would see the same couple that would stand in the doorway. She's 7.5 years older than me, and her room became my room. And we'd see the same couple all the time. Some other interesting things that happened when we lived in that home. But a dynamic that we never spoke about until I was in my 20s and she was in her 30s. And it was something that was suppressed for quite a while. Um, the whole kind of resurfacing, re-emerging, reconnecting really happened about 5 years ago. I think all of us go on this spiritual awakening, and once it starts, it continues on until we decide to leave this planet. And so I'd had different phases at different points in times, but probably the most significant was around 5 years ago. You hear people talking about the dark night of the soul and going through a
Mhm.
death of some sort. And that was really what happened to me. I was at a point in my career where I was teaching full time. My daughter was 5 years old. She was in kindergarten, and some symptoms that I had had periodically through the entirety of my adult life, probably even in my teenage life, really exacerbated themselves. And I knew I wasn't happy after I went back to work after my maternity leave with my daughter, in continuing on teaching, but I just didn't know what it was that I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And to be quite honest, my husband and I live away from our families. We have no family support. He owns his own business as well as works shift work. And so it was a very isolating and demanding time. And I was burnt out on all levels. And so I got physically ill, was ill for about 6 or 7 months. I went from prepping to compete in an Olympic weightlifting competition for masters to
Wow.
sleeping 16 to 20 hours a day. I had lost 15 pounds. The pallor of my skin was gray and yellow on the daily. I was going for constant diagnostic tests that were all coming back clear, even though I clearly wasn't well. I would have abdominal pain daily for 2 to 6 hours and then nausea. I could barely function. And I was so thankful that my daughter was in full day. We opted for full day kindergarten. I basically taught for September of that school year. And then I went on medical leave to explore and heal. And it kind of sent me on a journey because as I was finding nothing with Western medicine, which I truly do believe has a place, I had a cancer mass that had to be cut out and removed. I'm not against Western medicine, but not finding the answers, I sought out other people who do energy healing, readings, clairvoyance, all of those types of things, because when you are down in those depths, you'll do any damn thing to feel better. And the
Mhm.
repeated message that I got from anyone that I went to see was, Suzanne, this is your purpose. Like, you have your abilities in the realm of something that we do, and you're basically breaking down to step up and surrender into this new place of being. And that's kind of where it evolved. I ended up taking my yoga teacher training, my 200-hour yoga teacher training. I got my Reiki masters. Um, I've done spirit release therapy, age regression, um, neuro-linguistic programming. What else have I done? Past life regression therapy, all of those modalities, but really a lot of it is just honing into what works with you. So I might have these certificates, but it's really just amalgamating all of these things and really trusting in my intuition, my capabilities, in helping other people with energy healing, and holding space for that.
That's amazing, and it does speak to all the things that you offer. And so, specifically, like if people come to you, is it would you describe it as kind of like a Reiki type setting in which you work with them? If it was one-on-one?
I suppose there's aspects, although even though I did take my Reiki Masters, something about that modality never resonated. Although, of course, access to universal energy, but the rest of it really didn't vibrate intentionally. I don't use any of the symbols. The way that I think about the chakra system has totally shifted in the last 4 months. I know that my chakra system is not based anymore on what the old chakra system was. Maybe we can have a conversation about
Yeah.
that and your thoughts, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, things about it, just some parts resonated, but it just doesn't. So yes, energy will flow through my hands, and it's coming from my heart space. When I work with people, we dialogue, so I talk a lot with them. Um, I can see what's held in their subconscious that they're ready to release. So I always dialogue and have a conversation with clients. It might be a 10-minute dialogue before I put them on the table. It might be 45 minutes. I really find the men that I work with just really want that safe space to open up. But instead of going to a therapist, which will you decide as a client or a patient how much you want to disclose, I, as the practitioner, see what traumas have been held in their body, what age frame, and range they were in, and I pull it out and I question them and I say, "This happened at blah 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 age. Are you ready to?" And I just pull it out right away and hold space for that instead of having to go through the process. I know I've been to therapy, counseling, psychologists, where every time is kind of a dance of how much am I gonna disclose today to the to the person holding space for me, whereas I can see it in their vibration and I know, I just know, claircognizance. And so I bring it out and address it, and then put them on the table. And definitely, as I tune in, my stomach makes very abnormal, bullfrog sounding noises as I process and transmute their pains that they've held on to, whether they're physical, emotional, energetic. And yeah, I just work with people in whatever capacity. There's a lot of things that I bring into that. I do some sound healing. I do a combination of all the modalities to really just, sometimes we regress back. Sometimes I'm getting information from past life and I pull it out. I like to work with the higher self of the client a lot. And of course, sometimes light language.
Beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful description. So let's get into the light language, because I've talked on the podcast many times about light code and light code
Yeah.
within the body. And that's like an energetic within the body. And I'm saying that because I really want to differentiate for people light code versus light language. And so from my understandings is light language can be written, spoken, sung, and it's a form of higher vibrational language that comes through. Now, and I know you can expand on this, but my question for you to open into that is, when light language comes through for you, many people describe that they see it like a light in their third eye, and then it comes out as word, writing, sound, or whatever. What is it for you?
For me, it's different. And I know that is the case. People will see symbols or blazing images. And for me, it is as if my heart has expanded to the most full capacity and it starts shattering into these fragmented crystals of light that pours out of my chest. And that is the sensation that happens for me. So it's more of a very physical sensation rather than seeing symbols. Although I know that there are some practitioners that definitely see the symbols. For me, it's like this outpouring of my heart.
Right. And
Yeah.
so where would you say light language comes from? Like, are you channeling beings? Are you channeling a dimension or?
Well, it depends, Jeanette. Um, it depends what your intention is. So the very first time that I went into the process, I connected to source energy and I asked to connect to my high self in and the light being that is the essence of my high self in order to clear away anything that was holding me back from not being at my best potential to hold space for others, that I wanted to be in best service of others. And so that was the initial kind of transmittance, if you will, of light language and the
Mhm.
intention that was held, which was about a year ago that this happened. Um, but since then, I can choose to tune into different light being groups and have their message come through. When I work with clients, I choose to tune into the frequency of their high self. I feel that that's the most beneficial for the clients that I am working with.
Okay, that's interesting. So the most of the time the light code or the light language coming through will be of your client's higher
High
self.
self. That's what
Amazing.
resonates as
Yeah.
truth to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful. And so when this first happened, was it something you were like, did you know you were going into light language or did it happen as a result of that cleansing and the tuning?
I think it was a point of readiness. And I honestly went into it and said, okay, I feel like this is the next step. I understand it's a heart expansion. And so looked at a couple of ways in which you can activate within yourself. And it started off, I started saying, I watched a couple of videos and they said, just start saying random sounds and then it'll come through. So that's exactly what I did. I
Mm.
went in and I said, Ra, me, tu, sha, bi. And I just kept chanting this. And my ego mind was like, oh, yeah, Suzanne, you're not going to do it. This is only other people do it. Nothing's happening.
Mm.
Okay, keep going. But I just kept saying it. And all of a sudden, I kind of leaned back and leaned forward.
Mhm.
And these sounds, intonations, body and hand movements, and emotion just came surging forward in such a flooded rush that I couldn't stop it. And so that aspect of myself that was speaking and having this dialogue with myself in light language was also separate from me, Suzanne, the 40-year-old at that time.
Mhm.
So I was very cognizant of what was happening. It was almost like my body split in two and I was witness to it. And I went, Suzanne at that moment in May of 2020 went, grab your phone. This is actually happening. Oh my goodness. Your daughter is upstairs playing Roblox. What if she comes down and sees you? It's okay. Keep going. And I was having this conversation as everything was, in my head,
Mhm.
as everything was coming out. Grab my phone about 20 to 30 seconds in, turn the camera on, just put it on record. And it was very important to me that I recorded because I knew that there was a message for myself and I knew that there was likely a message for other people in them being able to be open to the emotion and heart activation that was present with it. And so I was able to get over 2 minutes of a recording of that actual piece of integration. And when I was done, I felt like I had been hit by a truck because it was like a huge, intense clearing and activation for me. It was like so powerful. It was probably one of the most powerful activations I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah, gosh, I can imagine. And I love how you describe how it happened for you in that, like the feeling of your body whooshing back and coming forward. And there's 2 points in that. And that first one of that feeling, I can completely understand that because I know when I channel information and human language, um, that I get the same thing. There's this like whoosh feeling when that energy comes in and the consciousness that is you and or I sort of steps back and the other one sort of steps forward. And it's not
Mhm.
about like some people worry about it's like being possessed and it's not at all. But this, I know what you mean by that step back and then the other one forward which then goes to my second point, is that you know someone is channeling truly when the information is flowing out faster than they could pause to think or bring it in, right? Like there's the whoosh and then it comes faster, and you're so accurate in your description, because I try to explain this to people all the time, that literally you are sitting there observing it happening through you, while you're sometimes thinking like, oh my gosh, like, well, what about this? But it's like, no, just stay there. And so it made me smile inside the way you're describing it.
It was so intense, and I've had some beautiful transmissions since, but of course that was the most significant for me because
Mhm.
it was so emotional. I was crying, my hands were moving in gestures, I was clicking. I was like, it was a very like sounds that I don't make, you know. I speak English, I can passably speak French, I know a tiny bit of Spanish, but there is no dialect that I know in my conscious mind that that it comes even close to what was being transmitted.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And it's interesting too, you were saying about clicks, because in some of the research I was doing too, they were saying how the interesting thing about light language is it's communicating something not based on the way that humanity understands language, or even telepathy, because they were comparing it to how like the mycelium and the mushrooms in the forest communicate through energetic impulses, or
Mhm.
dolphins and stuff communicating through clicks and whistles, which actually project a holographic piece of information, right? So it's
Yes.
like a completely different way of even understanding language. And from what I've heard before, when I've experienced light language with you, there is like all those kinds of sounds. And so for those of you watching and listening, Susanne said she would bring through some light language transmission, and I think it's worth saying for people that have never heard it before and are watching this, like, what the heck is light language? It is not necessarily going to relate to anything here. It would be an amalgamation or a mishmash and beyond. Like it's all kinds of sounds.
It's all kinds of sounds. I say it feels ancient and galactic. It is a combination of sound, light, cosmic energetic frequency that comes out. You feel it at a very heart and soul and subconscious level. Often when I transmit for clients, there's a very intense emotional reaction to it and an expansion just in the heart center. Um, but yeah, your conscious mind can't process it, but you can feel this response into this place. Yeah.
Mhm. And so when you bring light language through, when you're done, do you have an idea of like what it meant or what it was for? Or like more, like, do you have a way to humanize
Interpret
it?
it.
Yeah, interpret it. That's a great word.
No, I mean, my ego really wants that, of
Yeah.
course. And I've had to surrender because I went into some dialogue with myself and I've had to surrender into it is not necessary for our conscious mind to understand it in order for it to be powerful and effective.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, well, would you be willing to bring through?
Yeah, I've been because I know you briefly asked me before we started if I would be willing, and I was like, "Oh, I don't think I want to channel any light beings. That's a little too foreign." But I'm going to channel in essence. I think, I'll connect to source and channel from my high self. What my high self feels is the activation that your viewers and your listeners will need. And it'll likely be short-ish.
Yeah.
Um, I close my eyes. I know not all practitioners who do it close their eyes. To me, it feels like I need to be.
Mhm.
And my body may do movements, and we'll just see what happens. But that
Sure.
was that it came through. It was like, no, it's just a message from my high self to you. But I might move that just in case my hand movements get a little
Sure.
big.
Sure.
And I
That's
don't
fine.
want to knock anything over. So
Okay.
I just want to explain to your listeners and your viewers that as you said, I'm in no way, shape, or form being possessed. I mean, had I done this 5 years ago, likely I would have been thought to have been possessed. I am completely fine and safe. And to just be open to receiving without having your mind try to analyze what happens. And so, if that means that people are listening to this, that they're closing their eyes and just allowing the vibration of the sounds to move through them and thinking about their heart. And if they're watching, again, the same, to really just, they can watch because there may be hand movements, but to really just feel that instead of trying to think
Think
about
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, so I am just setting my intention. And I always say that when I tune in, it takes like on the old school radios where you have to dial that frequency to
Mhm,
find your station.
mhm.
So sometimes it takes a little bit to hook in, and then it'll go. So just holding the intention that all of your listeners are receiving the healing and activation that they need in this moment in time as I connect to my high self in this light language transmission. Inarakanastu itari karitau oritau narakoriastu muikai naya utoriako ainari mini orikast oisa narkoriminari kitsa o itauri kada ustinari arika me isturedam nari karist dari ari atawi nar inari kamast uredara aurimnakodori astadoriata nar kaya winari nari girista areus I narebidaro nan Maria that's a wood down daria yo stau it's ari tapat tawin narika ikowist at saw in sarpari or naria akustari nari saw round sound or the coach down na puri town naria ma ikawisa iramene gurist ari da ayog tawid rhythm I corridor naria usta inzawana naria was aria kunna must oriata wata ina baria norika aya in sawe oria nak zawet awist ari batsko o tamnere ari kaim I zawri ar nark uri nari ashto tsar nari da ma jitotori ai kam yes to we tawetar ma ashto arin ai with ari na would story ari ni dari tawanare a koritsa with to rimashed with sa my guy now it a stuk the wita. And as always, I always just give thanks to Source for allowing me to transmit.
Beautiful. I had chills in the beginning and then I got like super warm and like peace.
Yeah, it's very interesting when I channel my high self, because I'm aware and listening to it, and it's very different. It has its distinct sounds and it's very sharp. It's always very sharp with me. And so when I tune in and I if people are familiar, I actually sent part of this to Shaman Durek. I'm like, hey, like, do you know what this is? And he confirmed for me. He was generous enough to do that. He's like, yeah, it's your inner light being, and it's just clearing everything in your way. And it's all of those things. I don't, I have talked about this before. I don't know what that means. I don't know like what star family, I feel connected to certainly. There's like 3 predominant star families that I feel the most connected with. I don't know what intonation that is, but it's very different than what I've heard, especially those that channel from the Pleiadians, which this is not. I know that for sure. So yeah.
It's beautiful. And it's really neat how it comes through with like you can try and listen to it in a very human way and try and figure it out like we do when we hear other languages, right?
Yeah.
And then you can just listen to it for just the sounds. And it's really neat how you move through the sounds and they flow even though they are very choppy and totally different one after the other. Like languages for us, we know have a flow of that style, whereas this, it's so weird. It doesn't have a flow in its individuality, but the whole thing does.
Yeah.
If I could say it that way, like that's what I find so fascinating about it.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. There was a bit of like, you know, sharing with pockets of people at first, but like scared to put it out there. And then in January, I was like, no, this is in essence who I am. I'm not crazy. I'm not possessed. I have a very sound head on my shoulders. And this is just part of where I'm at this moment in time. And it needs to be shared for those who are ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because, I mean, for people that want some context, like we use mantra in our world. We use a word or a phrase. Sometimes it's even in a different language that we don't speak, but we're trusting the word or the phrase to bring an energetic resonance in our body, right? That is in a known, more logical human way. This is bypassing that, but it's essentially could be considered the same thing. It is sound to provide sound healing, just like we use sound bowls or chimes or, you know, but it comes through another person's voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love it. I'm so glad you were able to share that with us today. And your willingness to step out and share it for everybody that needs to see it. I mean,
absolutely.
This really is the time for that. And so it's beautiful that you're doing it in your path and the way that it resonates for you. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
So listen, if people want to get in touch with you, either to be a part of your online school or individual sessions, because you do, again, them in person and virtually, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Two ways where I'm most predominantly active, of course, on my website, which is really easy. It's www.susannevenaas.ca. So my name is weirdly spelled, but SUSANNEVENAAS. Or my Instagram handle is my name, so it's just at Susanne Venaas. And again, SUSANNEVENAAS. That's it.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. And I'll attach those at the links below.
Perfect.
If anybody wants to actually click on them, they can go direct to you. This was wonderful. And this was very enlightening. And I'm so grateful for it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me and for holding the space for it and sharing all of these wonderful things that are meant to be put out into the world in this time and space of being on this earth.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. And thanks. And to everybody else watching, for more information, just subscribe on YouTube if you want, and also like and share any of these posts, because you guys, the more we spread the consciousness of being open-minded, the more we have the abilities to find our journeys. And that's what we're doing. So I wish you all a wonderful week, and we'll check back next week.